Hello, my name is Jay and Charity. Right now, my major is professional sales and marketing, but I will soon be changing it to political science. This is my Russian-Ukraine conflict presentation. I chose this topic because it's an incredibly important event that's critical to international relations in 2025. I chose this topic because it allows me to look at such an important conflict before it gets put in the history books. This presentation focuses on the Russian-Ukraine conflict while providing context so we can understand what happened that led to these events. Without context, this conflict would be a meaningless war being fought over nothing, when in reality it is a war over much, much more. Ukraine became an independent nation called the Ukrainian People's Republic for a few years in 1917. They were invaded by the Bolsheviks, who were coming to power in Russia. Ukraine was defeated and then became one of the USSR's Soviet Socialist republics. Under the USSR, there were policies that Joseph Stalin, the leader of the USSR from 1924 to 1953, created that were meant to discourage Ukrainian culture. They took control of education, and Russian ideals were pushed. The act of creating calculated policies that are meant to reduce a culture's identity and push Russian culture is called Russification. It's a process that is meant to eliminate a culture so that people believe themselves to be Russian, which makes controlling them easier. Another way Stalin dispersed Ukrainian culture was through forced movement. Millions were forced to leave where they lived and were dispersed throughout the USSR. Russian people were then moved to Ukraine and forced to settle there and become part of the population. This had a significant long-term effect on the culture in all of the USSR. Ukraine was under USSR control for many years until the USSR fell in 1991. A referendum was held where the people of Ukraine voted to become an independent state. 92% voted for independence. We understand what has happened in the past, we can look at modern day events. In 2014, Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula, which was a direct violation of the Budapest Memorandum. The Budapest Memorandum was basically a promise to Ukraine the country will be secure if they give up the nuclear weapons they have from the USSR. Many countries condemned Russia. Russia used the land and people as a launchpad for its invasion of Ukraine. There had been over 3 million people in the annexed land, and it was about 7% of the land in Ukraine that was now under Russian control. Once Russia annexed, they began to change education, as references to Ukraine's history were scrubbed from curriculum. There were also efforts to militarize the population in Crimea. There was a social movement called the Young Army, which is how they imbued the young population with the idea of fighting for Russia. What were the catalysts that sparked this event? NATO is one of the biggest threats to Russia's security, so when Ukraine was having thoughts about joining it, it became a larger problem for Russia. The more that oppose Russia, the worse they're off. The more that Western influence grows, the likelihood that Russia will do something to strengthen their position will grow. Putin has plans to try and restore the glory of Russia, and the war in Ukraine is a step he's taking. Putin has never believed that Ukraine is a sovereign country. He claims Russia was robbed when the country's borders were first drawn. He believes it to be historically Russian land. Restoring Russia is his number one long-term goal, while preventing Ukraine from surrounding itself with allies is his closest goal. Russia's goals are mostly to empower themselves against Western countries and make more steps toward power. Firstly, they wish to embarrass and have faith be lost in their enemies, which is the West. This will embolden the country and make allies and citizens of Russia more faithful to their government. If they can gain more influence, then they could push around weaker countries who don't have a chance of fighting back. By doing problematic things outside of their country, Russia lessens some heat that they have internally from their citizens. Negotiations and ceasefires. These are words that have been thrown around by media about the potential solutions to this conflict. President Trump has been trying to bring Russia to the negotiation table, but it's been clear that Putin does not plan on negotiating for peace. Military aid is an effective way to support Ukraine and try to prevent Russia from doing what it wants. Whether it's money or weapons, many countries send Ukraine military aid. The problem with this is that it costs the country sending the aid money, but by supplying Ukraine with new tech, they can test out new tech while empowering Ukraine to fend off Russia. Another step countries have taken is imposing economic sanctions on the Russian economy. This puts Russia in a difficult spot, as its economy takes damage from its hurt trade. However, Russia still remains a key exporter for oil and natural gas, so its position cannot be totally upended by sanctions. The last possible solution would be Ukraine joining NATO, but that seems exceptionally unlikely at this point. To allow Ukraine to join would mean conflict with Russia on a large scale. That is why Russia attacked when it did. That's my presentation on the Russian-Ukraine conflict. Thank you for watching.